There are serial killers who are driven by desire. Some kill from compulsion, others from delusion. But then there was Israel Keyes, who killed for no reason at all. No pattern, no signature, no plea for fame or legacy. He hunted strangers across state lines, buried kill kits years in advance, and vanished into the anonymity of ordinary life. This isn't a story about a man out of control. It's a story about a man who craved it and built a life to hide his chaos in plain sight. Israel Keyes was born on January 7th, 1978, in Richmond, Utah, the second of 10 children in a deeply religious Mormon family. His upbringing was isolated, both geographically and ideologically. The family lived off-grid in Colville, Washington, without electricity or running water. They were self-sufficient, devout, and suspicious of outsiders. Later, the Keyes family would abandon the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in favor of a stricter Christian identity movement, an ideology tied to white supremacy. This environment was rigid and insulated. There was no television, no pop culture, just nature, scripture, and silence. Israel was homeschooled. His earliest companions were his siblings and the surrounding wilderness. He learned to hunt, to track, to move quietly through the woods. From a young age, he could shoot a deer with eerie precision. Animals didn't scare him. Neither did death. But there were cracks in the foundation. Childhood friends recalled that Israel seemed different, detached, emotionless. Once he tied a cat to a tree and shot it in the stomach, then laughed as it died slowly. Another time, he broke into a neighbor's home and stole a gun, not out of need, but curiosity. And then there was his reading material. Israel was fascinated by Ted Bundy, not in a fanboy sense, but in a clinical, strategic way. Bundy was a template, intelligent, charming, methodical. But where Bundy wanted fame, Keyes would aim for invisibility. In 1998, at age 20, Israel Keyes joined the Army. He served in the 1st Battalion, 5th Infantry Regiment at Fort Lewis in Washington, and was later stationed in Egypt and Texas. His military record was unremarkable. No disciplinary issues, no awards. Fellow soldiers described him as quiet, polite, someone who drank and listened to Insane Clown Posse and Slipknot. They remembered his dark humor, his obsession with serial killers, and a disturbing lack of emotion. But in the context of military culture, none of it seemed unusual. After his honorable discharge in 2001, Keyes settled in Alaska. He started a construction and contracting business, Keyes Construction, and quickly gained a reputation for being dependable and hardworking. Customers trusted him. He attended school events with his daughter. He dated. He paid taxes. No one had any idea. But Israel Keyes was never about impulse. He spent years constructing a life that offered the perfect cover, a career that required travel, an image of stability, and total control over his schedule. Israel Keyes didn't kill on a whim. Every murder was preceded by years of planning. He didn't scout victims. He scouted geography, airports, rental car routes, highways, hiking trails. What fascinated him wasn't the act of killing, but the architecture around it, the logistics, the orchestration. To facilitate this, he created what the FBI would later call kill kits. They were buried caches, 5-gallon buckets sealed, and hidden in remote areas across the country. Inside, duct tape, plastic bags, rope, zip ties, guns, silencers, cash, Drano. Some had shovels. Others had weapons stolen years earlier. Each kit was weatherproof, anonymous, and patiently waiting for the moment he would return to use it. These kits weren't buried near his home. They were buried thousands of miles away. One was found in Vermont, another in upstate New York. Others remain undiscovered. They weren't marked or mapped. Keyes kept everything in his head. In his FBI interviews, he described his process as a sort of delayed gratification. He'd bury a kit and return years later, choosing a victim only once he arrived in the area. There was no personal motive, no emotional attachment. He chose strangers. Randomness was his disguise. In his own words, "I would let the victim come to me." Most serial killers have a signature, a specific type of victim, a method of killing, or a pattern that investigators eventually trace. Israel Keyes rejected all of it. He studied other killers to learn what not to do. He didn't target a specific gender, age, or race. He used different weapons. He committed murders across multiple states. There were no trophies taken, no ritualistic staging, no post-mortem posing. He was a ghost, not an artist. He once told investigators, "You can't keep doing the same thing. That's how they catch you." And for over a decade, it worked. Between 2001 and 2012, Israel Keyes roamed the United States in rental cars, flying into one city and driving hours to commit a crime in another. Then he'd reverse the journey, creating false trails across state lines. He used cash only. He turned off his cell phone. He avoided surveillance cameras. If a place seemed too risky, he left. There was no urgency. He was patient. This made him virtually impossible to track. Law enforcement typically builds a case around victimology or location. But Keyes offered no pattern to follow. He didn't want attention. He wanted control, not over his victims, but over the chaos itself. In 2012, after his arrest, Keyes eventually admitted to killing at least 11 people, but refused to name most of them. He didn't want their families to have closure. To him, even that was a form of control. But investigators believe his first murder occurred in 2001, near his hometown of Colville, Washington. A couple had disappeared while camping. The case was never solved. In interviews, Keyes spoke vaguely of killing a couple and disposing of their bodies in a lake. He described dismembering the victims and using concrete to weigh them down. The details matched the missing persons case, but he never confirmed their names. He claimed he had no emotional connection to the murder. It was practice, a test of his ability to plan and remain undetected. He called it a learning experience. From then on, his confidence grew. He knew he could kill without being caught, and so he kept going. The true number of Israel Keyes victims is still unknown. In the recorded FBI interviews, he admitted to at least 11 murders, but hinted there were more. He claimed that most of them would never be found, and for good reason. He had buried or destroyed the bodies, left no trace, and killed far from home. Investigators believe he's responsible for disappearances in Washington, New York, Vermont, and beyond. He mentioned victims that were never linked to any known missing persons cases. The ambiguity was intentional. He didn't just want to commit murder. He wanted to vanish behind it. In one case, Keyes described a murder committed in New York. He flew to Chicago, rented a car, drove over 1,000 miles to Essex, Vermont, and used one of his buried kill kits to abduct and murder Bill and Lorraine Currier, a local couple. Their bodies were never found. The details were disturbing. He entered their home in the middle of the night, tied them up, and transported them to an abandoned farmhouse. He killed them separately, then destroyed the house to erase the scene. No evidence. No survivors. These were the acts of someone who didn't crave the kill itself, but the orchestration, the layers of deception, the ability to manipulate time, space, and chance like pieces on a chessboard. For Keyes, every murder was an operation. On February 1st, 2012, Israel Keyes made a mistake, one that would ultimately lead to his capture. And it began with the abduction of 18-year-old Samantha Koenig in Anchorage, Alaska. She was working alone in a small coffee kiosk when Keyes approached, wearing a ski mask. He pulled a gun and forced her to turn off the lights, zip-tied her wrists, and let her out of the kiosk at gunpoint. Surveillance cameras captured it all, but not clearly enough to identify him. He took her back to his home, where his girlfriend and daughter were out of town. There, he held her captive overnight, then murdered her the next day. But the story didn't end there. Keyes, always calculating, kept her body frozen in a shed outside his house. 2 weeks later, he sewed her eyes open, styled her hair, and took a Polaroid photo, posing her to look alive, alongside a ransom note demanding $30,000. He then used Samantha's phone to text her boyfriend, making it seem like she was still alive. This level of manipulation was unlike anything investigators had seen. It was meticulous and chilling. But Keyes made a critical error. He used Samantha's ATM card to withdraw the ransom money. That single move, caught on multiple cameras, would be his undoing. After killing Samantha, Keyes embarked on a trip across the southern United States. What investigators would later discover was that during this journey, over 4,000 miles, he transported her frozen body in the back of his vehicle while attending a cruise with his family in New Orleans. To those around him, he was just a father taking time off with his loved ones. But behind the scenes, he was withdrawing ransom money using Samantha's debit card, captured on surveillance in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. He wore disguises, gloves, hoodies, bandanas. He covered his face, but left just enough of a pattern, enough for the FBI to follow. His ability to switch roles, from dad to killer, wasn't a split personality. It was compartmentalization. He didn't see contradiction. In his mind, these were parallel truths. Eventually, on March 13th, 2012, Keyes was pulled over in Lufkin, Texas. In his car, police found Samantha's phone, her ATM card, a mask, and a gun. They had their man, but they had no idea just how far this would go. When Israel Keyes was arrested in Texas, law enforcement initially believed they had captured a man responsible for a single murder. What followed would shock even the most seasoned investigators. In the days after his arrest, Keyes was calm, cooperative, almost eerily composed. He waived his right to an attorney and agreed to speak freely on one condition. His crimes wouldn't be made public. He didn't want his daughter to know. Over a series of interviews with the FBI, he confessed to abducting and killing Samantha Koenig. But then the confessions kept coming. He spoke of traveling across the country with the sole intention of murdering, of burying kill kits, of abducting strangers, killing them, and disposing of their bodies in remote areas. Some he buried, others he dismembered. In at least one case, he set fire to the scene and watched it burn. He seemed to take no pleasure in the murders. He described them as necessary parts of a system he'd built for himself, a personal code of control, order, and secrecy. Yet, despite his cooperation, Keyes remained intentionally vague. He withheld names, dates, places. He enjoyed the ambiguity. The FBI believed he was involved in as many as 11 murders, but with only 3 confirmed victims, the scale of his crimes remains unclear to this day. The FBI tapes reveal a man both calculating and self-contained. Israel Keyes wasn't unhinged. He was precise, cold, deliberate. In the interviews, he would shift between matter-of-fact recountings and philosophical musings. He once said, "I'm 2 different people, basically." But unlike killers who claim mental breaks or alternate personalities, Keyes was entirely aware of his actions. He made rules for himself. Never kill close to home. Never kill someone you know. Always destroy evidence. He broke one of them with Samantha, and he paid the price. Over time, the interviews took a toll. At one point, he told agents he wished he had never been caught. Not because he feared prison, but because he had more plans. He wasn't done. On December 2nd, 2012, Keyes was found dead in his jail cell at the Anchorage Correctional Complex. He had slit his wrists with a razor and used bed sheets to strangle himself. He left behind a blood-smeared suicide note, 12 stanzas of cryptic verse filled with references to death, consumption, and violence. On the walls, drawn in his own blood, were 11 crude skulls, one for each of his claimed victims. No names, no faces, just skulls. Israel Keyes didn't kill out of passion. He killed out of purpose. To him, the chaos was the order, and the silence, the distance between each crime, was not a sign of guilt, but of discipline. He left no manifesto, no demand for fame, just fragments, places, silences, and skulls. His story is not a blueprint of madness, but a chilling study in control, one where evil is quiet, careful, and patient. So what do you think of today's video? Do you have something you want us to feature next? Tell us in the comments. It will also mean a lot to us if you like and subscribe. Close the book if you can. This is Black Chapter.